Jonathan Lee Riches investigates. I am covering the Moscow, Idaho Bryan Kohberger case. I have a source that has shared with me and gave me a statement about IGG. IGG is centered around the Bryan Kohberger case, the SMP profiles. Now, I want to show you something first, because I'm going to share this statement with you from my source, who clearly explains what's going on with the Moscow, Idaho case in reference to SMP, IGG. But I want to show you something, because the Reddit people right now, on Reddit, the pro-Bryan Kohberger Reddit threads, I call them pro-burgers, BK supporters, they're confused. They're very misinformed. And they think that they caught Bill Thompson in a lie in the courts the other day when it came to SMP. And I want to share what they think, the Reddit people. Seems like a little bit uneducated. My source knows a lot about IGG, by the way. But I want to share this, and then we will further discuss. Check it out. So this is from the Reddit thread, Bryan Kohberger Moscow. It's a predominantly pro-Bryan Kohberger thread. Did you hear this? New disclosure by the prosecutor. They admitted for the first time that they used two distinct SMP profiles for BK. Say what? Just came up in yesterday's November 2nd hearing. For the first time, we now know that there are two distinct SMP profiles that were used in this IGG investigation. Even the judge, as well as everyone else, thought it was only one profile that was used to generate the family tree. We would not have known that if Ann Taylor, like any other public defender, stuck with the speedy trial timing. She would have gone to trial without knowing this major development. I think this is a vindication to her brilliant approach to stick to her guns and hire those IGG experts to persuade the judge to rule on a new approach in Idaho case law regarding this new sinkhole called IGG. Or am I wrong? The profile that the FBI used was adjusted and is distinct from what was generated from the touch DNA sample. Wow! This isn't that a major development? Let me know what you think about this Reddit thread. It's kind of funny. So what do you think about all that? Now, I want to show you what my source shared with me. This I believe. Let me know if you believe. And it kind of maybe puts things into perspective about the Kohberger case. Check it out.
The public's understanding of IGG is very limited because it's a relatively new technology that has quickly become prevalent in solving crimes. Here we have Bryan Kohberger observers conflating DNA samples with SNP profiles. SNP profiles are generated from a single-source DNA sample using algorithms to create a computational representation of the DNA. Of course, SNP profiles differ substantially between law enforcement and private genealogy companies. When different labs analyze the same DNA source, distinct SNP profiles emerge. This should not be seen as some sort of revelation or major development. It's common practice for separate labs to generate unique SNP profiles from the same DNA source. All of this confusion is a great example of why attorneys should not try their cases via public court motions. The Kohberger defense team recklessly stated in one of their motions that there were two unknown male DNA samples found in the home. Of course, those DNA samples are not unknown since law enforcement would have tested them, but they are unknown to the defense because they were not included in evidence. This is most likely because those individuals were cleared, and therefore their DNA would not be qualified to be entered into databases or evidence. Nevertheless, conspiracy theorists latched onto this information thinking that there is some sort of cover-up and that the prosecution is hiding something. Bill Thompson's mention of two SNP profiles is not a revelation, but a straightforward consequence of two labs testing the same single-source DNA sample. It's not remarkable or even newsworthy, but this entire topic highlights the dangers of taking defense attorney statements at face value, which in turn fuels baseless allegations against the prosecution and breeds an overall lack of understanding and misinformation. To be clear, IGG testing does not involve DNA collection. Law enforcement didn't obtain Bryan Kohberger's DNA through IGG. Instead, they generated a unique SNP profile to build a family tree that identified the killer's father. They acquired the father's DNA from the trash outside his Pennsylvania home and compared it to the sample found on the knife sheath. This is why IGG is considered an investigative tool, not evidence.
Interesting stuff. I'm not an expert on IGG, but the person that you just heard, a source to me, is. And they provided great insight about the whole IGG process. Now, Bill Thompson spoke about IGG at that November 2nd, 2023 scheduled conference in court hearing, just the hearing that we just had. I want to share what Thompson had to say, the prosecutor.
We are going to give you everything we get. And if the court has questions, the court can ask those questions however it feels it needs to. If the court wants to bring in outside help to understand in the way of an expert or something, we don't have a problem with that. We want the court to be able to make an independent decision on this, taking into account and considering the concerns that we have expressed through our briefing and argument, and understanding the court's interest in ensuring the defense has access to what it legally would be entitled to, and that appropriate protections are put in place on sensitive or personal or private information as the court deems appropriate, so that third parties are not injured by what is occurring. Yes, sir, and that would be our intention. As soon as we have everything that is out there, it's our intention to put it together and submit it to the court and have kind of a list of table of contents or index, whatever I want to call it, of everything that's being provided to the court. I will say, listening to Ms. Taylor's recitation of all sorts of specific types of stuff, that based on our understanding, there are items that she thinks ought to be there that do not exist in the way of documentation form in any fashion. We will give you everything that we are provided with, and we have asked for everything that exists, both from the private lab and from the FBI, and that's our intention. But I don't think that the lawyers ought to get into this guessing game of what should and shouldn't be there, particularly since it is our position defense has a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between SNP profiles and traditional DNA comparisons and how that process works. When we start talking with statistics and those sorts of things, those don't necessarily apply in the investigative genealogy world. So I don't want there to be false expectations, and I certainly don't want the court to be misled that things of relevance exist that do not.
Well, I understand that issue to some degree because I've been reading your briefs back and forth. So I understand that that is a repeated kind of issue, and I think, excuse me if I'm wrong about this, Ms. Taylor, but they want to be able to see what has not been documented. So that's one of the issues that there's going to be a struggle about, and I understand that the process, the procedures of some of these IGG procedures are not documented. There might be some notes. I understand that the FBI has some notes. So let's start where we know we have things, and then we can go from there.
Yes, sir, and that's how we prefer to proceed. I was just reacting to the laundry list of things that Ms. Taylor was reciting that, based on what our experts have told us, don't necessarily exist in an investigative genealogy SNP analysis. They may exist in a traditional STR DNA analysis. And those are two separate and distinct processes. They do not overlap at all. So we want to make sure that there's no confusion, because some of the things that have been submitted by the defense don't accurately talk about the distinction. And that's why Mr. Nye, in our filings, submitted the affidavit from Ms. Nowlin at the Idaho State Lab, talking about the distinction, the difference between two separate approaches to DNA. I just don't want to muddy the waters. I don't want there to be false expectations created.
I
We
understand.
provide, as always, everything that we get, everything that we can find, everything that's provided to us, we will provide to the court for its review.
Okay, so that was William Thompson, prosecutor. What do you think about all this IGG, SMP? It's fascinating stuff. I'm learning through this while I'm covering the Bryan Kohberger case. I'll be reading your comments. I could say that none of us are an IGG expert, right? The majority of us out there. So when you see different things out there, take it for a grain of salt. Maybe talk to an IGG expert. I want to believe the prosecutor. Is Thompson wrong about any of this? Is Bryan Kohberger's defense right about this? A lot of uncertainty in my mind. Subscribe to my channel, hit the notification button. Let me know what you think about all this. We will talk soon. Stay tuned.